Welcome to the YouTube channel Globetrotting with Lynx. I am your host, and I guess I should probably get the name right out of the way from the start. I'm a science fiction fan, and I was honored with a fictional peerage by a group that I used to run, and that peerage was Lynx. Now I tend to use it in fandom circles, but also as a nickname, as I really like it, and it goes well with my new image from a few years ago. For this third episode, I picked something that's very personal to me, and that was Stockholm, which is one of my absolute favorite cities. If you listen to our podcast, you know that I was there this summer and had an amazing time. It is a vibrant city and one that I highly recommend you visit if you get the chance. I was fortunate enough to travel with WinWin Sorela, the penultimate Queen Universe Philippines, and we both greatly enjoyed the sights of Stockholm. So, Stockholm, the name is of Germanic origin, as is the Swedish language, and Stock in Old German means fortification and Holm means islet. Some of these old fortifications, or at least part of them, can still be seen around the city. According to the Erik's Krönika, or the Chronicle in English, or Erik's Chronicle in English, Stockholm was built on the island of Helgeandsholmen by Birger Jarl. He played a major role in the creation of modern Sweden when, after the civil war between the houses of Sverker and the house of Erik, he consolidated power to create the house of Bjälbo, which is regarded as the first monarchical house of Sweden. Jarl was a title which was eventually replaced by Duke or Greve in Swedish after his death. From 1463, when Riksrådets privilegiebrev, or the Letter of Privilege from the Privy Council, came out, Stockholm was the de facto capital of Sweden. From 1397, Sweden had been part of the Kalmar Union with Denmark, and Stockholm was a major nerve center in this union. In 1520, the Danish king Christian II entered Stockholm, and later that year perpetrated the Bloodbath of Stockholm. Stockholm's blodbad, if you want it in Swedish. This was, in essence, a show trial for heresy and supported by canon law. But the outcome was that 100 people were executed, because of course they were, because it was canon law. And it was a show trial. What gave it the name Bloodbath was that these 100 people had been promised amnesty. This made many of the nobles in Sweden afraid, and one of them, Gustav Vasa, who had been promised a pardon, fled. He was Sweden's riksföreståndare, which is essentially the protector of the realm. He hid out in a region called Dalarna, raised a rebellion, and in June of 1523, after the success of the rebellion, was elected king of Sweden, and the Vasa dynasty was founded. By 1600, the population of Stockholm was about 10,000, and by 1634, it was the de facto capital of the Swedish Empire under Gustav II Adolf, also known outside of Sweden as Gustavus Adolphus. You may remember him from the first episode and the Vasa ship that we met there. By then, the population was close to about 60,000. During this empire phase, new rules were put into place that gave Stockholm a monopoly on trade between foreign merchants and the Swedish, Baltic, and Scandinavian territories. In 1625, the city suffered its Great Fire. This lasted for 3 days and resulted in approximately 1/5 of the town being lost. In 1697, we saw the original palace, Tre Kronor, or 3 Crowns, burn down. And it was replaced by the palace that can currently be seen in Stockholm today. Gustav III, who reigned from 1771 until he was assassinated in 1792, ushered in the Swedish Age of Enlightenment. Under his patronage, culture was expanded in Stockholm in the guise of museums and the Royal Swedish Opera. He was also, despite being painted by history primarily as a dilettante, one of the kings who won a war with Russia, which led Sweden to reestablish some of its political clout in Europe. It was also during this time that music flourished in Sweden with names such as Carl Michael Bellman and Josef Martin Krauss, both well known in Sweden and beyond. Science was also on the rise at this time, with the Stockholm Observatory being founded, and Carl Linnaeus and Anders Celsius were living in Stockholm at the time. Linnaeus, of course, being known as the father of modern taxonomy, and Celsius giving his name for the temperature scale. Stockholm saw some decline in the early 19th century, but by the end it had rebounded. It was at this time that the universities were built, such as Karolinska Institute and KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology, or Kungliga Tekniska Högskolan. The Nobel Prizes were also established at this time. Stockholm is one of my favorite cities, and one of the few cities that I would be happy to actually live in. I should clarify that a little bit by saying that I'm basically a suburban animal and prefer a slower pace. However, Stockholm is one of 3 large cities that I would be very happy to live in. The main reason for this is that there's always so much going on in Stockholm, and it is a city which is just filled with history. There's always some new part of the city to dive into or discover which you didn't know about before. And what makes Stockholm so livable is also what makes it a great city to visit. To understand this, you first need to understand the mindset of most Swedes. First off, they are very friendly. In general, striking up a conversation with a Swede is fairly easy, and they're always happy to talk to you. Almost all of them speak English, so if you're there as a tourist, you have very little to worry about. And in most of the hotels, you can usually find someone who speaks German, French, or Spanish as well, and in recent years, even Polish or one of the Baltic languages. They will always be curious about you and happy to talk. Another important thing to know about Stockholm in general is that it's a walking city. I love walking around Stockholm. Of course, you can take a bus or the metro to get around, and also taxis or Ubers, but the best way to see Stockholm is to walk through her neighborhoods and parks. Stockholm is a city with parks and green spaces in addition to beautiful buildings and classic architecture. There is so much beauty in this city, and of course, little cafes everywhere just to sit and grab a bite or a fika. Fika is a concept I feel I should really explain a little bit more, especially to my non-Swedish audience. Fika is a Swedish concept, and what most people outside of Sweden assume that it is, based on what they see, is that it's a coffee break in the middle of the day. But this is a misunderstanding of fika. You would, for example, never have fika alone. Fika alone is just a cup of coffee or a snack. True fika is a social thing. You have it with family, friends, colleagues, or sometimes a combination of all 3. And it doesn't technically have to be coffee or pastries. It could be sandwiches and a drink. Although, most commonly, it is coffee and pastries. But that is only part of it. Fika is also companionship and good conversation. And by companionship, I really mean friendship. Sitting down with friends and family and just enjoying their company and a good conversation. And there are plenty of good places for fika around Stockholm. Some of the most cozy places are actually in the Old Town, Gamla stan in Swedish. I love this area because of all the historic places and just how quaint it is. You don't feel like you're in a metropolitan city when you're there, even though it's surrounded by a metropolitan city. This area also includes the Royal Palace, along with Livrustkammaren, which is the Royal Armory. Remember Gustav II Adolf from earlier? He's the reason Sweden has a royal armory as a museum. He sent back trophies from his wars on the continent, and he decreed that they would be shared with the nation in this museum. Now, there are a few places in Stockholm which are truly must-sees when you are there. I did an entire episode on the Vasa Museum, so I won't spend a great deal of time on it here. But it is an incredible museum and should be one of your top destinations in Stockholm. Nearby is Skansen, which is a park and garden. It's worth a walk, especially during the late spring, summer, and early fall months. And it's right next to Djurgården, which literally means animal farm. It's one of the oldest open-air museums and zoos in Europe. Gröna Lund is an amusement park in the area which dates back to 1883. It's very similar to Tivoli in Copenhagen, Denmark, which was founded in 1843. Here you can find rides that you'd find at standard amusement parks. They have a really nice wooden coaster, actually, if you like old-style wooden coasters. And it's a fun place to go for adults and kids. Also in this area is the ABBA Museum. This museum will bring you through ABBA's history, including their 1974 win at the Eurovision Song Contest with their famous song Waterloo. It also brings you through some of their other escapades, and it's just a fun museum to visit. A short walk away from all of this, especially the downtown area, you can take the opportunity to visit Östermalm's Saluhall. This is a foodie's delight, where you can experience many Nordic foods. Here you can find classic dishes like Swedish meatballs, which is a Swedish classic, served with nypotatis, these are red potatoes, and lingonberries. Fun little side note, meatballs actually originate from Turkey, and they were brought back to Sweden by one of our kings, and have since just become a staple of Swedish food. You can also find other Swedish classics like gravlax, which is cured salmon in a sauce. The sauce can vary, but popular ones are either a mustard sauce or a dill sauce. Usually it's served with cooked potatoes and a small salad. There's also an opportunity in the Saluhall to sample toast skagen. This is an open-faced sandwich with shrimp, lettuce, tomato, mayonnaise, fish roe, usually salmon, and lemon. And it's just an amazing thing. Usually the bread is a little bit toasted, and it's just a delicious, delicious thing to taste. If you're a foodie, you will love it. Another short walk away is Svenska Akademin, or the Swedish Academy. This is the home of the Nobel Prize Museum, where the Nobel Prize, aside from the Peace Prize, are decided and issued. The Peace Prize is, of course, issued in Norway. The prizes which are awarded are for physics, chemistry, physiology, or medicine, and literature. There is also an economics prize, but it isn't actually a Nobel Prize, but is generally awarded with the same status. Each prize also comes with, as of this year, approximately a $1.035 million cash payment. From there, Gamla Stan, or the Old Town as I mentioned, is just another short walk. This is one of the most historic areas of Stockholm, and there are so many things to see here that are worth seeing. No visit to Gamla Stan is complete without a visit to the Royal Palace. There you can see the royal apartments, which are historic rooms used by the previous royals. You can also visit Skattkammaren, which is the treasure chamber, where the crown jewels are kept. One fair warning, though, that these are a little bit difficult to get to if you have mobility issues. Also in the palace is Livrustkammaren, the royal armory. This is where you can see some of the various outfits and armor worn by the kings and queens of Sweden. It's also where you can get a very nice historical timeline of Sweden from the time of Gustav Vasa all the way up to our current king. In the basement, you can see the various carriages which have been used, including the coronation carriages. Gamla Stan is also a place filled with restaurants and cafes, including one of my favorites, Bellman's Cafe. You might remember earlier I mentioned Carl Michael Bellman, the musician, The cafe is named after him. This cafe, which serves classic Swedish pastries such as princess cake and semlor. Both of these are traditional, and while you can get princess cake almost any time of the year, semlor were traditionally served on Shrove Tuesday, or Fat Tuesday. Today, of course, they're served from shortly after Christmas through about Easter, and realistically, you can probably get them almost any time of year. Bellman's Cafe is a perfect place for afternoon tea or Swedish fika, one of the many in the area. There are also gastropubs, traditional pubs, high-end restaurants, and everything in between. Gamla Stan is also a fairly large tourist area where you can do a lot of shopping. There are amazing jewelry stores. You can buy Baltic Amber. If you're into gaming, there is an amazing gaming store in Gamla Stan that I highly recommend. It's actually a science fiction bookstore. It's incredible. The harbor area by the Grand Hotel is another short walk from here. And this is where you can catch a ferry to the Stockholm archipelago. This is well worth a visit, especially in the summer if the weather is beautiful. The archipelago itself is made up of about 24,000 islands and has about 10,000 permanent residents. Vaxholm is one of the more popular destinations with a regular ferry service from Stockholm Harbor. Many of these islands have wonderful nature walks and great places to eat, as well as some wonderful shops with local arts. It's anywhere from a half to a full day's excursion from Stockholm, but absolutely well worth it. This is also where it might be worth mentioning that one of the reasons you can walk in so many of these parks and green spaces is that Sweden has a concept called allemans rätt, every man's right, essentially. And man here in general for human. And this concept is that land is public, land is ours. So, yes, you might have your own private backyard, but most green spaces are open to the public, and the public can go to pretty much all of them. There are some lands up north that are crown lands, and these are basically kept as conservation lands. And it's limited what you can do on those. But for the most part, unless it's like a military installation or a private land like a golf course or something like that, most green spaces are open and you can walk on them. It's kind of refreshing. It's like the entire country is one big national park, which is really why Sweden doesn't have national parks in the same way that an American would recognize them. We don't have a Yellowstone. We don't have a Grand Canyon National Park. We just have all of the open green spaces. So this then brings us to the end of this episode. And I do hope that you've enjoyed this chance to learn a little bit about Stockholm and that I've enticed you to visit. I also hope that you enjoy these companion YouTube videos to our podcast series. And if you haven't checked out the podcast series, you can find a link to that in the description. And remember, if you want some help making your travel dreams come true, feel free to email me at lynx@globetrottingwithlynx.com. That's all one word, globetrottingwithlynx.com. You can also find a link to my Fora profile, as well as a link to the Globetrotting with Lynx booking site, where I can help you book some amazing cruises and travel adventures of your own. Until next time, please keep having amazing travel adventures and enjoy your own globetrotting. This is Lynx saying travel safe and have